I've got three people on the speaking list. We'll go to Mr. Angus first, followed by Ms. Shanahan, followed by Dr. Carey. Mr. Angus, we'll turn to you.
Well, thank you, Chair. First off, I would like to wish Happy International Women's Day to all the incredible women parliamentarians in our institution and the incredible women everywhere who do so much incredible work for our building a better society. La deuxième chose, je suis très...
The second thing I want to say is that I'm very concerned by the actions of the Kielburger brothers. Considering the challenge faced by the committee, so I'll be supporting my colleague's motion. It's unacceptable for the Kielburger brothers to refuse explaining themselves. They have an obligation to appear before the committee to explain their role in the student grant scandal. And it's also an opportunity for the Kielburger brothers to explain their role in the allegations of manipulation of international donors. It is essential for the Kielburgers to respect the rights of Parliament to request their testimony to launch investigations in on the use of government funds.
Just to say, how did we get here? And to put this in a very clear picture so we understand, because we are dealing with a very disturbing and unprecedented situation with the refusal to appear and the threat to defy a summons. Today should have been the last day of witness testimony of our study into the $912 million in taxpayers' money that would have been given to the Kielburger Group. This study began 8 months ago, and it has been subject to, I would say, an unprecedented level of interference and interruption. Last summer, we were on the eve of getting key documents in the scandal when the Prime Minister shut down Parliament because of the corrosive effects of the revelations that were coming forward from both the Finance and Ethics Committee investigations. When Parliament reconvened, our committee was blocked by filibustering on the government side for the equivalent of 20 straight meetings. So that meant we were well into November before this committee could pick up where it had left off in the summer. In the end, all parties came together and agreed that we needed to finalize this report per our obligation to Parliament, and we agreed on a final set of meetings, and that would include the testimony from the Kielburger brothers and other key representatives of the WE organization. But instead of us being able to finalize this report, the Kielburger brothers have announced they are refusing to appear today. Not only that, but through their lawyers, they have stated that leadership of WE will also defy Parliament. I'm not sure if they're including some of their staff in that refusal. But even more extraordinary is their claim that they will defy a legal summons if it's issued. This is a direct challenge to the powers of Parliament to investigate spending and issues of insider access that were well within the purview of our committee. And it is well within the constitutional privileges that we have as democratically elected members representing the people of Canada. So what happened in the last 2 weeks to cause the Kielburger brothers to take such a reckless course of action? Well, a little over a week ago, we heard extraordinary testimony from a major WE donor who made allegations of donor manipulation. Mr. Reid Cowan is an Emmy award-winning journalist, and he is a member of WE Charities Advisory Board. And following his very emotional and powerful testimony to our committee, he stated the need for an IRS, CRA, and police investigation into how this group raises funds. Reid Cowan has a right to get answers from the Kielburgers, and those answers should have been presented to our committee today. Would the Kielburgers have faced hard questions? Certainly. But when you are in the business of raising charitable funds, trust and accountability is sacrosanct. And so you show up and you answer the tough questions, because hard questions on fundraising are also fair questions. But Reid Cowan wasn't the only problem facing the Kielburgers last week. Bloomberg released a damning article entitled, quote, "WE Charities' Actions Leave a Trail of Enraged and Grieving Donors." The article lays out disturbing allegations of donor manipulation, where the emotional ties of potential donors were played on to get major fundraising initiatives undertaking. And Bloomberg states that, quote, "WE donors include grieving parents, school kids, corporate sponsors, wealthy foundations, and widows such as 89-year-old Joyce Jennison. And they say, Joyce Jennison is left wondering why that little schoolhouse with the green roof in the photo has been dedicated to another grieving family. Where is her husband Don's plaque? Because it's more than a plaque to her. It's his tombstone. Joyce Jennison has a right to hear testimony today, but instead the Kielburgers have gone to ground. And then last night, CBC followed up with a disturbing expose of a similar pattern of donor manipulation in supporting a water project in Kenya. And Mr. Chair, when I watched that documentary, I was really deeply moved by the incredible volunteerism that we see in our country. In places like Whistler and Mount Forest, where so many people came together to make a difference. And they were inspired by the promises of the Kielburger brothers about how their money was being spent. It made me think of my own two daughters, who when they were young read Craig Kielburger's autobiography. I drove them hundreds and hundreds of kilometers to Free the Children events. They began raising funds for a school in Nicaragua because they believed. And we need to reassure people that their goodwill efforts matter, that their time and their fundraising is respected. Because when you are in the business of raising funds, you are in the business of raising hope. And all those people who believed and hoped they were making a difference have a right to hear the Kielburger brothers explain to themselves. And today was an opportunity for Craig and Mark Kielburger to take the hard questions and explain what is going on in their organization. But having to put those explanations on the record in televised hearings appears too much for them. So they've gone to ground. And they've stated through their lawyer that they will defy any legal summons to what they claim is an attempt by a, quote, partisan committee to carry on its own substitute investigation. There is no substitute investigation. There is the parliamentary committee that has been assigned to this since last summer. It is the Ethics Committee investigation, and we are being blocked right now by their refusal to testify. So, fair question. What do the issues of grieving and angry donors have to do with the report of this committee? Well, when we look at the $912 million that was being set aside for the Kielburger organization, it comes down to three questions. One, was proper due diligence done on the claims made by the Kielburger brothers to deliver a very complex program involving a staggering amount of money in a very short period of time? Two, did the Kielburgers get the inside track because of their close relationship to the Liberal government and the key ministers on the file, for whom the Kielburgers had curated strong personal connections? Did this inside track involve illegal lobbying? And I would have loved to have had Craig given the opportunity to explain how he worked those corridors of power and how he did follow the rules, if he did indeed. And the third question is, what exactly is this group and how do they operate? We have We Charity, we have Me to We have the We Foundation, we have a multiplicity of side companies, real estate holdings, and shell companies, and bureaucrats took it for granted, as I think we all would have, that they were dealing with We Charity. But in the end, the Canadian people were asked to sign over $540 million in that initial funding agreement to a shell company that was set up to manage We's immense real estate holdings. A shell company. How is that possible? Is it because the Kielburgers' reputation was seemingly so stellar that no hard questions were asked? And after 8 months of investigation by this committee, I can say that I'm sure every single member of this committee is no further ahead in knowing how the money flows, or even how many corporate entities the Kielburger brothers control. And we would have asked those questions today, but they are no-show. Now, the Kielburgers are portraying themselves in the media as politically naive, that they were somehow the victim of partisan mugging. But the facts do not back this up. If you watch the meteoric rise of the Kielburger brothers, you realize they carefully cultivated their political friends. They built strong relationships across North America. They knew how to work the Davos crowd. And the Kielburger brothers worked very closely with Justin Trudeau when he was running for leader. They helped create his image as the aspiring stadium hero for young people. That's Craig. No, sorry. They gave him a stage and helped build his brand, even to the point of doing promotional videos for him. When Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister, the Kielburger brothers were essentially adopted as goodwill ambassadors for Canada. They led the Canada 150 celebrations. They were chosen to represent Canada at the UN with a huge stadium-type show that featured the Prime Minister and his wife. So they cannot now defy our democratic institutions because they say it's partisan and it no longer works for them. We learned how carefully they cultivated their relationships with Finance Minister Bill Morneau. They hired his daughter. They sent their volunteers to work his events. They paid $41,000 for him and his family to travel the world. No wonder that Morneau's staff called the relationship between Bill Morneau and the Kielburgers as, quote, besties. And this relationship was so solid that on April 10th, 2020, Craig Kielburger bypassed all staff in the finance office and wrote directly to Bill Morneau. Hey, Bill. I hope this finds you, Nancy, Henry, Claire, Edward, and Grace enjoying some well-deserved downtime. And that message, Craig was asking for Bill Morneau to sign off on $12 million grant. And within a mere 11 days, the finance minister gave a verbal sign-off on this funding. And at no point was Craig Kielburger registered to lobby. His director of government relations, Sophia Marquez, who was also not registered to lobby, said to our committee that she was not involved at all in the negotiations of this $12 million proposal. This was handled by Craig Kielburger. A $12 million side deal negotiated by two besties. This is not how funding projects are supposed to be handled in Canada. And Craig Kielburger could have been here today to explain how that went down, but he's not. And that April 10th outreach by Craig Kielburger led to the meeting with Minister Chagger on April 17th, where, according to both Marquez and Kielburger in their subsequent emails, Minister Chagger gave them the heads up on this separate service stream proposal that became the $900 million grant. And I got to point out here that both Minister Chagger and Minister Qualtrough, whose ministries oversaw this proposal, had been featured on stage at the We Day rallies. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. But the issue here is that when tough questions should have been asked, nobody was asking them. Because despite claims that the government was looking at other options, the documents are clear. The Kielburger Group had the inside track from the get-go. There was no other group spoken to, or no other organization offered the chance to bid. So it doesn't cut it today for the Kielburgers to have exploited this extraordinary level of insider access with the corridors of power and then to refuse to answer questions about how they use these relationships to their advantage. So now let's just connect the dots in my final segment here between the DonorGate scandal that's emerged in the media and the summer student grant scandal. One of the deeply disturbing allegations in the Bloomberg article is the fact that multiple members of the WE staff joked about what they called Kiel math. Quote, Bloomberg spoke to nearly 24 former staffers whose employment spanned 2 decades across the world. They described a corporate culture they said played fast and loose with the facts. Kiel math was how the staff referred to the way we quantified its impacts. So why does that matter? Because we see all through the Kielburger documents to the Canadian government's claims that when you look at them closely, simply don't add up. Let's take the fact that the Kielburgers initially claimed they could take 16,000 students themselves. This is an organization that had just laid off hundreds. And when Finance Minister Michelle Kovacevic wrote that they were not only going to take 16,000, they were ready to take 20,000 students. Well, then the Kielburgers toned it down and said they could handle 10,000. Any of those numbers is an extraordinary amount. If anyone out there who's done any kind of work in trying to run programs to suddenly announce that over a month you're going to take 20,000, 16,000, 10,000, maybe you could. Maybe you couldn't. But you would have thought that tough questions would have been asked to say, okay, exactly how is this going to go down? So when they said that they toned it down to 10,000, they said, well, here's the thing. We've got a deal with Imagine Canada to get another 10,000 students placed. That was stated on April 30th by Craig Kielburger. It was updated in their claim of partnership on May 4th. And Minister Chagger did not question these claims. In fact, she brought their statement word for word into her cabinet briefing. So it was Kielburger spin and Kiel math that was being used to sell cabinet on the idea. This Kielburger language was repeated by ESDC to reassure the Treasury Board when they began to ask how was this going to go down. And this is significant because The Imagine Canada partnership reassured department officials that this project was doable. But there was no agreement with Imagine Canada, and neither Chagger nor Morneau's office bothered to check. Imagine Canada even felt the need to come forward to say that they had no partnership on this. And yet in late June, this supposed partnership was still being promoted in Minister Bill Morneau's notes. So what does that tell us? That basic due diligence wasn't done. That it was the Kielburger brothers and Kiel Matt that was trusted from the get-go. So if the Kielburger brothers had shown up today, we could have asked them those hard questions, because unlike their testimony from last July, we have the documents now that actually show how things really went down, something we didn't have when we first questioned them. And they could have responded to all our challenges. If they had facts on their side, this was their opportunity to set the record straight. And any group, any organization that's looking to receive $912 million in taxpayers' money, they must be willing to show up and answer the hard questions. Instead, the key players in this scandal are refusing to testify and defy Parliament. We have an obligation as parliamentarians at committee to take the evidence heard at committee and present it to Parliament. We cannot be obstructed in this work just because the central people in the drama do not want to be accountable. And the fact that we've been forced to issue 4 legal summons to compel testimony from an international charity that has worked in the schools of all our children is a staggering situation. Charities are transparent. Charities are accountable. We should not be in a situation of having to issue 4 legal summons just to get answers about how they operate. But I would say, colleagues, that this issue is bigger than our committee and the Kielburgers, because the threat to defy a legal summons from Parliament is not simply obstruction. It is a challenge to the entire parliamentary system that we have, because what we do as parliamentarians sets precedent. And if we set a precedent that it's okay to ignore Parliament, then others will follow in due course, and it will undermine the democratic accountability mechanisms that we have. So we have a big issue before us. What I would like to do today is I'd like to amend my colleague's motion to state that we will give the Kielburger brothers until this Friday to appear. If they do not appear at committee by Friday, we will consider them to be obstructing and hostile to the work of the committee. We will prepare the report that we have been working on as we were intended to do and prepare that finding to Parliament. But we will also, and I'm asking my colleagues to consider, if they do not appear by Friday, to prepare another report to Parliament to refer this issue of contempt of our committee to Parliament for consideration. Thank you.